myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well.
Okay, well, we can get started. I think we have a big agenda for tonight, so let's get to it. So I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:08 on this beautiful Wednesday, the March 10th. So approval of the agenda. May I have someone to pass the motion of approving the agenda for tonight? Allison Shannon, thank you. Seconded by Charles Foreman. Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes. So last meeting, just a month ago, it went by very quickly. Can I have someone to pass a motion on the approval of the minutes? Charles Foreman, excellent. Seconded by Allison Shannon, excellent. It's just going to be the three of you guys voting, and then all those in favor, show a sign of the hand. Excellent.
I wasn't there, so I can't vote. So.
Okay. Excellent. So Julia, and the non-voting of Councillor Usharoff for the meeting minutes, does that count as 3 yes, 1 no?
I've never Miss James to jump in here. She has her hand up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Julia, and to you, Madam Chair. Although Councillor Usharoff wasn't there, he is perfectly eligible to vote. We just would not have him move the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
Excellent, perfect. Thank you for the clarification of that. So let's just do the voting on this again. If you don't mind showing your hands for the approval of the minutes. Show of hands, excellent, thank you. And I think I skipped the voting for the approval of the agenda. We had someone to motion it, someone to stick on it. Can we all vote in favor of the agenda? Thank you.
Just to include the addendum as well for the agenda.
Oh, thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, so the addendum came in this afternoon, a little rushed, so hopefully you had a chance to review it. And it does include a correspondence at the end. Excellent. So are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest for tonight's meeting, tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we can move forward to the delegation. We welcome Megan Knott from Tourism Kingston, who will be speaking to us about the Kingston Culinary Strategy. And we'll hear again about the Kingston Culinary Strategy in a business item, 7B, tonight as well. So I think that we're having two sections for this report. It's all leaving it to you, Megan. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much for welcoming me here this evening. Last month I was here, but sort of on a support basis when CIO Hurdle presented about the public market and the proposed changes to the bylaw. And it gave reference, I think, at that discussion, portions of the culinary strategy that the City of Kingston, Tourism Kingston, Downtown Kingston Association, Frontenac County, and the RTO9 larger tourism entity all partnered on back in 2019. So I believe a copy of that strategy was sent to you in advance, and if not, I can definitely forward that after the meeting. But that culinary strategy really came about because we did a larger integrated destination strategy as it relates to tourism, trying to focus on the key pieces and sectors that would move tourism in general forward within our community, and not just locally, but sort of regionally. And with that came really a focus on culinary tourism. And so I really loved sort of the dialogue that happened at this particular committee meeting last month. And so I have 5 quick slides, but it was really more just to be able to put my face to a name and to say that, you know, offline, I'd love some more dialogue about your ideas, because I think they were really indicative of what we're trying to do in culinary tourism regionally, and putting that connection between that farm to table component. Next slide, please. So the culinary strategy, there's sort of 3 components to it, but it's really focusing on themed itineraries, meaning if you come to Kingston and enjoy all of the great things that we have to offer, that we try to pair a component of food and drink into that sort of itinerary in terms of how you're going to spend your time within Kingston and the region. And that means not just traditional sit-down dining, but that means activations that also include food and drink, which really feed into that component of the marketing bylaw and the amendment to suggest that sampling could be a component of that public market, just as it is at the farmers market, the Memorial Center. And it also really, we really focused on partnerships between sort of farmers and producers, and then how that relates to stakeholders at the table, the sort of the other end of sort of that path to purchase. And so making sure that we really had a good sense of who our producers are, what they're producing, and then be able to understand and facilitate partnerships throughout kind of that food ecosystem. And then identifying workforce development. Where do we have gaps from that farm to table process? Like, are we missing, sort of, and I think this was brought forward at the last meeting. I think, identifying the situation where sometimes farmers are having a lot of trouble connecting with actual restaurant owners to be able to connect and bring their, whatever it is that they, are growing or producing into the actual restaurant, because oftentimes there's that sort of that the ability for us maybe as stakeholders to bridge those conversations to support further the notion that we really want to develop that farm to table pipeline and not miss any of that kind of that path to purchase simply because there's sort of a communication error or lack thereof on our side. And also to, own the narrative is the next portion. So really wanting to drive home, as, you probably know in other destinations, what really is, or what is Kingston known for in that food and that drink narrative? What is it we own that you can't get anywhere else? And then why is that driving people to come to Kingston? And, we really suggest that we have more restaurants, I think, per capita than any other community our size within Canada. And so, why is that? Is it because we have such a clear connection between rural agriculture and, then the table, or that drive or that cluster that we seem to have in Kingston? And is that ecosystem healthy? And if it's healthy, what kind of stories are behind it? And if there's stories, how are we unfolding those stories and telling people that you really want to come to Kingston to enjoy these types of signature experiences? And then it's evergreen is the last piece here. Evergreen meaning that, sometimes we struggle in tourism to suggest that we're an all-season destination, because oftentimes it feels like now, especially today, spring is coming, things are melting. We see trolleys on the road, we see boats coming in, we see, COVID aside, we see lots of activity, oftentimes things kind of opening up. And but in food and drink, the narrative never really stops. So no matter where we are in the calendar, there's always that seasonality to the production of food. And so there's always a new story to talk about and a new offering to come and to enjoy in Kingston. Next slide, please. And so with that, with that study, what we did was we really had a great, with Richard Allen out in Frontenac County, we really had a great partnership that we started back in 2019, and we continue on through 2021. And it's really talking about the offerings that Richard connects us with in terms of the producers within Frontenac County and the niche production that they create and the stories behind how they create these things. And then us being the storytellers and having the platform, making sure that people understand those stories, because oftentimes, you have an amazing dish of whatever it may be, an experience at a local restaurant, and you want to know where that came from, or who produced that, or where can I go to get that? And so they're not scared as a tourist to go travel to kind of see or experience whatever it is that they really enjoyed in Kingston. And we want to create those interlocking and reciprocal kind of relationships between the table to the farm. And we have, we've ran a lot of campaigns through 2019 into 2021, really relying on those unique stories and experiences in production that we have within this partnership. Next slide, please. So Kingston Licious is something that we just really kind of unveiled, if you will, in the start of 2021. It's not unlike things that you've seen, Winterlicious, for example, that happens in Toronto every year. Sort of thematically talking about what kind of food offerings you can enjoy in the city of Kingston based on local production. Seasonally, monthly, it changes based on kind of what's available for restaurants and chefs preparing food, what kind of those themes are. And then we really are the storytellers to make sure that people understand what you can enjoy in Kingston that week, that month. And it's really a call to action. So it's really trying to drive a lot of culinary experiences in a time when we need tourists, because right now we don't have a lot of sports teams coming into town. As you know, we don't have a lot of meetings and conferences, not a lot of weddings. So food consistently is kind of that theme and that offering that we can continue to talk about. Next slide. Other collaborations. So, important to note, I think that, and some of these were talked about last month at this committee, chef demos in the square are a great way to tell stories. And we hope that we can continue to do that maybe more often as it relates to, sort of an expansion of the public market offerings, understanding that Market Square potentially could have a sort of, I think we used a software last year called Sociavore, but making sure there's more experiential types of opportunities in the square as it relates to food and drink, making sure that really we have a multicultural lens to those food offerings, working with partners to see if that can be something. Obviously, COVID will restrict what we can and can't do this year, which is understandable, but, kind of post-COVID, what these types of things can look like, and working larger than us, working with Destination Ontario to make sure that we're captured in the Great Taste of Ontario, which is kind of their storytelling campaign. And we know that locally and regionally, I think interprovincial travel due to COVID will be something that will be the ability to kind of monopolize on. We're not going to see a lot of international travel. So it's really sort of neighborhoods or local regions telling other regions about their stories and having that traffic kind of come in and out of our region safely, of course. So those were my sort of high level points, but again, really, I was just making sure that you could put a name to a face as it relates to the culinary strategy, and more a conversation if there's any suggestions or dialogue that you wanted to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. This was an excellent presentation, and honestly, your slides were gorgeous, and that they made me very hungry. So because this is a delegation, the committee members each have a limit of 2 questions each, and we will not open discussion to the public, but I believe that this item is on our agenda again as a business item, so we'll be able to revisit that and open up for a little bit more conversation at that point. So just wanted to open up the questions to any of the committee members. Please show a sign of hand if you would like to speak. Councillor Usharoff, please go ahead.
I'm absolutely willing to wait for Allison and Charles. So I missed last meeting, so I've been living 1 month in guilt. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Megan, for that. It is an excellent presentation, and I too share the excitement of this. So I can share that my wife are here, and we love the Kingston Licious. So we just can't decide. There's a lot of good choices here. We are definitely. I guess I wanted to ask you. So there's a lot of buy-in here. Like what we're on the tip of the iceberg of potential, maybe. I guess, or we're there. But what? Again, the pandemic and the whole COVID experience for all of us is creating greater opportunities in some ways as well. And I was happy to see that you we are thinking about, it's going to continue. So we understand that some of this is going to be a positive experience. Do you have good buy-in from outer area restaurants too, not just the downtown? Are you seeing potential for a good spread of it all, so it's spread everywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Kingston Licious campaign is something that obviously is spread across the entire city of Kingston, and even outer skirts beyond sort of city limits, to be able to support food and drink offerings. And we see a great uptake, to your point about the hardest decision is which one to have, because they're all great. So we have had a lot of support. I think where the program needs to grow, and probably why I'm here tonight, is really to get some feedback or some thoughts about how we can continue to connect to local producers, local farmers, because it is the stories that really resonate the most with tourists. And so our network is never limited to a certain number. It has to grow. And, quite frankly, it's more word of mouth and coming to groups like this that allow us to connect more with people that, can sort of support the notion of storytelling. Because quite frankly, Charles, I learned a lot from you last meeting, is that, if there is a hiccup in the process of producing something and then being able to offer it within a restaurant or another food platform in the city, that got me thinking, we don't have a restaurant association in Kingston. We have, a hotel association, we have a tourism partnership, we have a downtown business association, we have a chamber, but we don't have a restaurant association that really connects the producers to, the local restaurants. That's sort of a void. And so, I'm just trying to think of a way that we can resolve that, so that, if Charles produces X product, that we can, easily facilitate the conversation with the farm to table piece, so that, the Kingston Licious program or other food program offerings can, expand. And that doesn't just go for food. I mean, that's other components too, right? That's local syrup and local honey and local flowers. It's all of those pieces that kind of flow together in your experience to fall under the umbrella of culinary. And so, it's been really helpful to work with Richard Allen, in Frontenac County, but working across all platforms to make sure people know, who we are, what we're trying to do, and how we're trying to continue to improve that across the city and across the region in terms of farmers and tables.
Yeah, that's excellent answer. Thank you through the chair. I think, thank you for saying all those things. I really appreciate our connection with Richard Allen, who we know well here in Glen Burnie, and is doing a great job as well. So again, I think that you're really onto something there with the restaurant association is good. The connection to local farmers. I mean, were you there last night? I have so many meetings going on. I'm dizzy with arts and.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, that was really good too, because I am excited about that, and I want this advisory board to know that too. Like, that's a connection to the market, and that's kind of your in there too, and we'd love to see that grow, and great business opportunities for our farmers as well. I hope I'm seeing the right picture of it, and I hope that maybe others can speak to it. How we connect with the local farmers and beyond through Richard Allen, and it's going to take a wide connection base, but I think you're onto a certain synergy that I want to applaud, and that see this continue to develop. So kudos for this and having it here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I saw Charles raising his hand a little bit earlier. Oh, Allison, you want to speak as well? Let's go with Charles first. I saw him first as he was right in my left peripheral vision, and then we can go to Allison.
Unmute. So the part of the problem is you got restaurants would love to buy from farmers, but because of weather and could be disease, insects, anything else, let's say you have a crop failure, and yet that restaurant you've got hooked up and you're going to supply them rutabagas or whatever. And all of a sudden you've got a crop failure, and then the restaurant says, oh my God, I was depending on that. That was going to be part of my menu for the whole summer, and now you've backed out. So that's a little bit of the reluctance of restaurants to want to team up with farmers. And then farmers being the way they are, they're all individualistic businesses. They don't necessarily want to share the restaurants that they're dealing with. I know I sure as heck don't. And I don't know that I would be very open to that concept of sharing all the information, because it's so hard to get your foot in the door to begin with. So I think you got a bit of a problem there, and I have no idea what the right answer is, but and that's just one of the few small problems there could be.
Thank you, Charles. I think that's duly noted. And I think that's very enlightening, as well as to the environment and circumstances that we're all facing. I don't know, Megan, if you wanted to speak to it before we move to Allison, or can let Allison formulate her point as well.
Yeah, I think from a perspective of culinary tourism and specifically restaurants, I think that there probably is the opportunity to have sort of a trifecta, or a kind of a come together, because if we're putting marketing dollars and storytelling initiatives behind local culinary opportunities or experiences, I think that heightens the anticipation and the buy-in from restaurants to do more, or do something special, or do something specific. I know lots of destinations, for week-long celebrations of something, celebrate that within their menu items, for example. So, whether it's seasonally something like a special vegetable, or a special seasoning, or a special added feature as it relates to that piece of produce being in season. And I think then there's more demand from restaurants to farmers, because we're putting a lot of bench strength behind pushing that out into the community. So I think it's probably a conversation. You're right, Charles. It's not, making sure that we understand specifically your business dealings. That's probably not it, but it's probably more across the board with restaurants saying, we're going to do a real push for the month of May on these particular pieces. We think that's, really helpful to drive traffic into the culinary scene, and then therefore demand of X whatever increases. And I think that, I think there's probably a dialogue to suggest that, Mother Nature, we can't control those pieces, but we can certainly pivot pretty quickly if something happens in that world, to make sure that, we minimize the damage or the issue for everyone. But then we also just kind of pivot to talk about what the opportunity can be. And so I'm kind of more at a high level looking at these components, and just making sure that there's not broken telephone or connection problems between, farmers and restaurants. And it's not just tunnel vision to downtown restaurants either. We have a lot of great restaurants. We have a downtown business owner that's now bought the Ivy in sort of Gananoque. So there's lots of opportunity to spread into like a larger community effort. Regionally, in fact, that's why we partnered with Richard, to make sure that they're, think local first, think to contact local farmers first, and then think of us to increase the ability for you to need those types of products from farmers, because we're going to drive more traffic and make this, something that grows.
So there's one other thing that maybe you shouldn't forget. We have a lot of local stores that also sell a lot of produce, and that's being sold to tourists and people who have rented a cottage or whatever, and to everybody local as well. They should be part of that as well, in my mind.
I agree. It's all about the experience, Charles. It's not just the restaurants. You're absolutely right. It's like that food map, right? So it's go to this particular area to buy these beautiful flowers, and here's why you should. And it's go to this roadmap to buy, maybe it's a stand at the end of a farm, or maybe it's here to buy this that you can only get that experience, like the creamery, for example, and buy these pieces and enjoy an ice cream. It's pushing people out into, the larger community to have those experiences. And lots of times it's called a taste trail or a food map. And we don't own that right now. There's the butter tart trail. There's kind of the food and drink trail up in Niagara Falls and Niagara on the Lake, for example. So we need to own something, I think is my point, Charles. And it's only going to be because of this kind of dialogue that we kind of start to own that, and then grow it, I think is the answer.
Thank you. Allison, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. Excellent presentation. Very enjoyed it. It's a dynamic and a pretty powerful marketing program, and it's got traction, and it's going to grow in traction for sure. One thing, if I might suggest, and you make reference to the relationship you have with RTO 9 and Frontenac County. There's a lot of, and the need, if I'm hearing it correctly, the need to connect with local producers in order to tell the story. As far as individual business dealings, who's buying what from a restaurant, that's really not what we should be. That's going to happen. Business will happen. It is the bigger, as higher level marketing strategy, that push, so that can, those connections will be made, the individual farmer, if there's a momentum and that story to be told. One story that's been told, and I know I've spoken about this in the past, but I must reinforce it, is just the story that's happened the last number of years with open farms that Frontenac County runs. And we're all familiar with open farms. And it's been very successful and can become even more successful. If I can comment, because I've been involved with it, and one limitation of the event is that it seems to focus solely on farms within, because by nature they have to, South Frontenac. And there is a whole jurisdiction within the city of Kingston, former Kingston, Pittsburgh townships out to Westbrook, that are not really, to be quite honest, part of that presentation. At least because I think there's geographical issues from a geopolitical conversation. And if you want to build a story in the city of Kingston, and if the county of Frontenac is going to put signs to invite people from the city of Kingston to come out to the countryside and make those connections, then why isn't there better coordination between the farmers and the brewers, the wineries, the cideries that are within the city of Kingston limits? Why? Because I don't think there is that opportunity doesn't exist. And I'm speaking strongly, but that just doesn't happen. And we've talked about this before. And if you're building a story, it's not about downtown Kingston. You skip over a whole piece of geography because all the farms are in Frontenac County. That's not correct whatsoever. And there's a lot of producers, and I just think we're missing a huge opportunity. At the same time, I'm sure the County of Frontenac would appreciate some resources, some dollars to help build this open farms event. And if there was, if those resources were put together, I can only imagine how great the potential of that event could be. And it was held strong by Alison Vanderveld, who's run it from the get-go, even in a year when it was held virtually. And, they have the farmers, but I think there has to be, it has to be a little bit more open door, because if the marketplace is in the city, let's say, people in Kingston, there's a community outside the city of Kingston, of which this rural affairs group represents, that isn't, by nature of however the geopolitical boundaries are, I can't emphasize this enough, but it has to be said, because that will grow, that will accomplish two things. That will grow the open farms event, and it will create that story that you need to tell, make it easier for the restaurants to feel that momentum in order to reach out to individual producers, because it's not just restricting it to a certain group. Thank you.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Allison, for reiterating that. I remember you mentioning it last month as well, and I think on a few different occurrences of explaining those points of leverage and opportunities that exist in the region entirely. Megan, I don't know if you want to speak to that. I'll let you have concluding words, unless I see John arrived midway through the presentation. So also inviting John to pitch in if he has any questions.
I 100% agree with you, Allison, and I 100% agree with working with Allison at Frontenac County. She's lovely. We've worked for a few years together on various things, and I don't disagree that it's a shoestring budget that's not going to sort of get the outcomes that are needed unless Tourism Kingston partners with them and leverages some of the funding that we have to make that a more inclusive program. So noted. I'll probably call you later, not tonight, but sort of in the month, and sort of get a little more background so we can fix that.
Excellent. Thank you. Very glad to see this open dialogue leading to more conversation for sure. So this concludes the delegation. Now I see this item coming back again as a business item 7B. Megan, are you the one speaking to that again? Just not sure if I'm getting confused with the agenda myself.
Yeah, Josie, I don't think it needs to be a business item. I think this happened last month too, where the presentation ended up in the business item. So if it's okay, I know my follow-ups, and I'll connect with folks. So, but thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you. Glad this was clarified. So the item of the agenda 7B will be, scratched off, knowing that we spoke to it as part of the delegation. Are we seeing you again anytime soon? So will this lead to more visits? Because this is certainly an area of interest.
Yeah. Why don't I suggest that after I connect with Allison directly later this month, that perhaps, leading into maybe June. So I'll give you guys a break for April. I'll come back with specifically this open farms piece and how we can be, more collaborative and open it up generally as opposed to specifically, and come back with a plan and some budget for that.
Perfect. Lovely. I'm very happy to hear that. And we already look forward. I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the committee, but we really look forward to having you again. Thank you, Megan, for your lovely presentation. All right.
Appreciate it.
Now on to the business items. So we have 4 business items, which makes this a big agenda tonight. Oh, yes, Julia.
There is actually a briefing from the addendum.
Oh, there is a briefing. Sorry, I didn't see a revised agenda. Okay,
Yeah,
and is
Campbell.
that, yes. And so that briefing from the addendum of Jennifer Campbell is not the same as 7D, update on the cultural programming opportunities in rural areas of Kingston?
She just has a few slides, so we put her as a briefing because it's going to be a bit longer.
Okay, so excellent. So we will go with the briefing, and then that will cancel out the business item 7D.
Unless there's members of the public that want to speak to it, or if you guys want to speak further to it.
Okay, so are we keeping it as 7D? Sorry, that's unclear to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are speaking it as number 6, briefings immediately before going into the business, and we will revisit it as a business, correct? Okay, thank you for clarifying that. It's confusing when I see an item coming twice in the agenda. I don't really know what it means. Okay, excellent. Well, Jennifer, welcome to the Rural Advisory Committee. Thank you for being here. Sorry, I almost skipped the briefing, but we are glad to have you here, and I'll leave it to you.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. And yeah, it was just a little longer than normally we have as introduction to reports. And I think that's why I'm in the briefing section and not with the report when it comes up. So thank you again. I'm Jennifer Campbell. I'm the manager of cultural heritage in the Cultural Services Department, of course, with the city. And I think many of you may remember that I was here last year, actually 1 year ago yesterday. And at that time, I was here to talk about our intents and our plans around working to set up and hopefully pilot, and then set a schedule, if you will, for programming extensions into rural Kingston. So we're back and we have some updates to share. And of course, you can imagine that our programming intents from last summer were not realized. Next slide, please. So when I was here the last time, I was speaking a lot to the culture plan, and particularly one of the recommendations within the culture plan. So just as a reminder, that was recommendation 38. which is a commitment to develop and deliver arts and heritage education and programming in the rural areas of Kingston. And we've seen since the culture plan was put in place in 2010, Council has additionally prioritized arts and culture initiatives, as well as those that intersect with vibrant spaces and the health of citizens. And so this has been a through line for the department. And last time I was here, I did speak a bit more about some of the programming we've been able to offer at sites like the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum. Next slide, please. So in 2020, we were just concluding a community consultation, it was March 2020. We were concluding our community consultation called Your Stories, Our Histories, which again underscored the need to increase the storytelling that we have in Kingston, but storytelling directed towards residents and about resident stories and histories and arts experiences and how all of these things intersect to create vibrant and vital cultural ecologies and living scapes that we want to occupy and be within. One of the takeaways we had when we were here last time, and thank you again to this advisory committee for sharing, some of the ideas that we took away from that meeting was the idea about extending and connecting the rural regions to other more centralized community programming. There was some discussion about things like, special purpose buses to take people down to events, and other ways to kind of take rural residents and create a stronger communication and linkage to some of those more centralized programs that really aren't going to move out of places like the Leon Center, for example. But we also talked a lot about, and I've received feedback on, respecting the unique attributes and attractions of the rural areas of their own, and balancing a need to not only draw people from non-rural residents into the rural reaches to appreciate and understand all of Kingston, but also to respect those individuals who choose to live in the rural regions and the reasons why they're motivated to do so, and to deliver programming that's really tailor-made to those rural experiences and to the communities and people that live there. So we certainly took that away from our last meeting, and we're starting to make some community connections with recommended contact points and community organizations, et cetera. And then, of course, next slide, please, COVID-19. So it was approximately 7 days after we met last year when our staff were sent home after the declaration of an emergency was made in the city of Kingston, of course. And this did have significant impacts, which I know you're all very aware of, on all of us, and including on the Cultural Services Department and the programming we were able to deliver over the course of what became summer 2020 and into the fall. So our staff a lot of us were either redeployed or we had layoffs within our department. We also had, for budgetary reasons, deferral of planned programming. And the long story short was that we ended up with a very small contingent of staff over the course of the summer of 2020, who became largely focused on delivering at-home experiences, so cultural programs people could complete from home, or alternately, eventually, when we were able, under direction from public health, we were able to open the Pump House Museum to small group tours, which took a lot of staff energy and focus. And at this time, we're kind of coming back around to regroup with you as an advisory committee about what our intents are in the summer of 2021, because we've not forgotten and we've been tracking how to get back in line. And I think it will be a slower rollout as we're all working through recovery and the new realities of what it looks like in the world right now to develop and design community programming. So we are anticipating in summer of 2021, the delivery of some rural programs. And unlike last summer, where we were looking more for community events, festivals, opportunities for large gathering partnerships, this year we're coming back with some discussion points around what we would consider more COVID respectful or COVID contingency planned events that can be rolled out at different levels and are, again, very focused on rural residents and what they and their families may be looking to experience as we all start to feel able to get out and move around and gather in small numbers following health and safety guidelines. Next slide, please. So one item that we are working to develop and turn remote, essentially, if you've ever attended the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum, we have historically offered Thursday night campfire songs. And so you see, of course, the word mark here, campfire songs at the MAC. But the program in 2021 is intended to actually move around the city. So we will be taking campfire songs essentially on the road. And our plan is to continue to hire local and emerging artists who themselves have been suffering quite seriously the impacts of COVID, and being able to not only empower them to share their performances with community members, but that we will be able to move this to small parks or public spaces, particularly in the rural reaches of Kingston. And then we can invite small family groups out to experience this. It allows for social distancing. It allows for some gathering and some taking in of live performance. And it seems, a very appropriate way to start to transition people back into a reemergence approach. And this is also part of, unfortunately, because of some of the restrictions we have and with the staffing that we have and the size of our facility, the McLaughlin will not be open to the public as a museum in 2021. So this is also an opportunity to leverage this programming opportunity and taking it out around the community and not just losing it because we're not able to open that facility at this time. Next slide, please. We are also proposing 4 separate programs which could be offered more than once each, which are arts-based programs. And these are modifications to existing programming that we have offered more central in the city of Kingston, and some adaptations of programs that have been successful at places like the Tet Center for Creativity and Learning, the Grand Theatre, etc. So the first one you see here is painting en plein air. And so we are working to develop with an artist instructor an opportunity where rural residents would be able to come out and essentially sign up for small group workshops where in the rural landscape, they would be led by an artist to do plein air painting, which itself is a fairly engaging activity. But we have amazing opportunities, as you all know, in rural Kingston to find beautiful spaces and places to pursue this kind of practice. Another is a poetry writing workshop series to be delivered by Kingston's Poet Laureate, Jason Haru. Jason has delivered poetry workshops in the downtown core. You see one of the images here on the left. That background image is actually related to some poetry that was installed in public spaces downtown, and then extended into some partnership opportunities with the library. But Jason's work in this rural programming is to really think about how we can be inspired by the rural setting to create poetry. And so like he has run workshops in other spaces and places in the city, the idea is to select specific sites in various parts of rural Kingston, and then people would be able to register to participate in these small group workshops led by Jason, where he talks about how do you approach poetry and its creation, and how do you take inspiration and kind of position that within specific landscapes. Another opportunity we're bringing forward and hoping to pursue is this Story Walk partnership with the Kingston Frontenac Public Library, another successful initiative that has been run elsewhere in the city. This is where families are invited to walk with a guide, and you encounter aspects of a book that have been installed in the landscape. And so it's an experience of the story as you're out in the landscape and moving around and through it. And then finally, we are working on performing arts-based programming in rural Kingston, particularly connected to the virtual Grand On Stage program. In the report itself, we mentioned Christine Friday, who is an artist and performer who's coming or has agreed to participate in the virtual Grand On Stage program, because right now, of course, we are not allowed to bring large numbers into the Grand Theatre. We have limited experiences right now in the Baby Grand, which is the smaller of the 2 theaters. And so the proposal right now is some of those performing artists are very interested themselves in coming to Kingston and then offering essentially workshop experiences with small groups of community members. And so these are extensions essentially of the virtual Grand On Stage program. So not only could you take in the program online, but you could then, like with Christine Friday, you could have an on the land dance experience where she would facilitate a dance workshop. And we are in discussion about what kinds of workshops she might run. Some may be tailored specifically to rural residents, who are themselves performance artists. But we are also talking about more generalist approaches where she's willing to run more than one. And so again, this would be on the land, outside, and an opportunity to engage with one of these performers. Next slide, please. So last time we were here, the question we sort of were putting to this group, and I was so thankful again for all of the follow-up I received after the meeting, We were asking about community groups and partnerships and festivals and opportunities. And actually, Allison, I think it was you perhaps that may have raised some discussion there even about shared festival opportunities and that conversation about the Frontenac kind of connection. I do remember that from some earlier discussions. So today the question's a little different actually, because we're having to start with such small groups. And so because these groups are bounded because of COVID restrictions, we want to stay really focused on rural residents and providing engaging experiences with the arts and culture in the rural parts of Kingston. Our suggestions or our requests at this time, or our ask for help, is really around suggestions of places to hold events like these. Now, we've looked, of course, at the parks inventory. We are familiar with those. And so if you had thoughts tonight, we'd love to hear them. But also if you have thoughts afterward, you want to follow up by email, that would be wonderful too. We're thinking about spaces and places where we know that families or residents in the rural reaches tend to gather. So for things like campfire, are there natural places where things like that are perhaps already happening? Maybe there's already fire pits in place. We also do have mobile fire pits we can bring with us. So that's not the barrier, but we just want to make sure that we find some good space to have these kinds of events where people feel comfortable and have access. And we are, of course, always looking for partnership opportunities in the context of what we're planning for 2021. We're particularly interested in any local associations or organizations, particularly those that are musician or artist focused, because we want those experiences that we're offering, as I said at the beginning, last time I was here, we did talk about rural for rural in some regards. So there are artists in rural Kingston, so they would like opportunity then to participate and facilitate some of these exercises. So for example, again, with the campfire program, we've not contracted any of the artists yet for those offerings. So now is a time where we are all ready. We would put out a call and we're already thinking about how to tailor that call to the landscape in which those offerings would happen. But if you had suggestions for people or organizations, we're very willing and excited to hear those as well. So I just have one more slide. Next slide, please. So I did just want to give you a bit of a timeline of sort of where we're at in our development process. So we have essentially drafted and briefed what those programs are intended to look like at this time. And now we're sort of getting into this early spring piece, which would be to confirm the program content, the date, the location, the times, so that in late spring, we would actually begin our communications and marketing campaign because we want to get people involved. And these kinds of events will, of course, have limits on them in terms of the number of people who can participate. So communicating early, communicating clearly, providing opportunity for people to sign up for things is really important for this programming to be successful. Over the summer, of course, the programming will get underway. And then similar to what we had intended last time we were here, we will spend some of the fall doing some analysis of the success of the programs, looking at community feedback, inviting people probably to some focus groups to talk about experience. And then most importantly, I think, is actually taking that information and developing a future programming plan, and one that starts to think about the things we talked about a year ago, and how, as we start to see some more reemergence and health and safety guidelines being lifted, how can we start to get back into where we were talking 1 year ago today? So we have been pushed back somewhat, but I think it's important that we do start to make steps forward. In some regards, it's an opportunity to get to know community in small groups, which can be a really valuable first step in building more programming for the rural reaches of Kingston. So thank you. That's all that I have for this evening. I'm not sure if we do questions now or if I'll do them at both times, but whatever you would prefer, Jose.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll throw the question to Julia. I'm not really sure how it works when we have a briefing and then it's open up for question of the business item. Do you have any direction on that?
Yeah, you guys can ask questions now, and then when it comes back up as a business item, it's just a second round for more questions or comments, and then also for the public to ask questions as well.
Okay, thank you. So that makes me realize that we lost Megan, not from earlier, but it would have been valuable to have conversations for members of the public to be able to identify any questions or comments. So perhaps when we revisit that in the business items, we can take notes of that, and then we can maybe connect with Megan. So that's
Yeah.
completely my my bad on that.
Yeah,
I
the
wasn't
business
sure.
item 7B is Lanny's report. She's not on the call yet, but maybe by
Okay.
that point she might be to speak to it.
Ah, perfect. Okay, excellent.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go through a round of conversation and discussion for the great presentation we received from Jennifer, and fully acknowledging I remember exactly a year ago the conversation we had and the year we've actually had and how it unfolded. So thanks for being here, and it's a sign of your true courage and bravery through COVID-19, because it doesn't get harder than planning social events with the restrictions we're facing now. So opening up for discussion, members of the committee, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Usharov, please lead the way.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't mind doing that either, and really look forward to hearing from the others. Thank you, Jennifer. It's nice to see you, and we really appreciate you being here for sure. And this just resonates as something that's so important. And I wish I could have more time for this instead of, worrying about culverts and some of the stuff. This is so important. So thank you for being here. It's not even possible for me to absorb all that you want. We need to keep talking about it, and we all do, to get an idea of how important this is, and how it will build our community and our city. I have the venues. We have some, we have to look back on what's successful in the past too. And, we do have enough. I mean, I'm not going to ask for a community center yet, but maybe that another year. But, we have, Brito Acres has a fabulous facility there with a wonderful community hall, great people welcoming to the community. We have excellent parks. We have one in Glen Burnie here that, people already come to gather. And we have Grass Creek, as you know. We have fire halls that never really get used properly. They have washroom facilities. We have amazingly welcoming church and faith communities that would absolutely love to have people there, I believe, and I understand that to be true. So, and we have farms, we have greenhouses, we have Charlie Foreman would glad to have everybody out there. And I would love to, anyways, I'm just saying, we have in the rural culture, in our community, we are welcoming people. And so when you talked about land, there's open land available. There's going to be no end to the possibilities of places to be. And so, it excites me to know that we have many rural artists in our area, and they would also have that. So I just want to say that, planning for the future, it's pretty wide open potential and possibilities. And I want to encourage you can call, this committee, we should be a regular spot on this panel for ideas, because it's so important that we continue the conversation and and the action, that we follow through, I guess is my word, Jennifer, and to the committee. So I'm excited to hear it. I'm excited that we can enable artists in our community, and that we have many, many different places for us to use and utilize and make a full expression of our cultural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, Charlie, you're muted. But I can see that you're trying to say that we're all invited to your place, right?
The smiley face there invited everybody, yeah. I'm just trying to figure out, how do you connect all the dots? I mean, we do a community corn roast type of thing. We haven't done it, obviously didn't do it last year. Love doing that kind of thing. And like the councillor said, all the fire halls, I mean, amazing infrastructure there that's barely getting used. It's sad, but same thing with the Rideau Canal. They'd love to see more people out and tour their facilities. I just don't know how you go about putting that all together. It sounds pretty complicated to me, but Very exciting.
And you know what? I think that links really well with some of the efforts on the culinary strategy we heard, in that things are not necessarily isolated. There's a lot of links and things are interweb, and seeing opportunities for some cultural events through perhaps what would be part of the cultural, culinary strategy. Like Charlie, you just mentioned a community corn roast, right? You can imagine some performing arts or musicians or singers or things that can go alongside with that, a little bit like pumpkin patch that happens in the fall, or apple picking. Things like that can lead to opportunities, at least for the rural areas where there is entertainment activities, cultural opportunities, while also having a way to appreciate the terroir, to appreciate the agricultural experience as well. So just a thought, as Charlie mentioned, the community corn roast, which kind of made me see a little bit of the links between all of these beautiful efforts. All right. Are there any other comments or questions? Oh, Allison, seeing your hands.
Thank you, through the chair. Jennifer, thanks for your presentation. And can you give us a sense as to what's a manageable and a realistic number of people that you feel you can accommodate in still times of restriction, that people will feel comfortable coming to, knowing that there won't be a lot of people? That's the other thing, the customer, who are we trying to engage with? Do you have any sense as to what numbers you're thinking for any of these wonderful ideas? Painting on plein air, the story walk, the poetry writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, so we do have some experience with this at the Pump House from last summer. Last summer at the Pump House, not only were we running small in-site or in the facility tours, which we were limiting essentially to social bubbles, we were also leading outside walks. And I think the outside walks are one of the easiest understood transferable kind of data points on that. We found that we could accommodate between 10 and 15 people in an outside walking group. And that's with the presumption that if each individual on the walk was not in the bubble of anyone else and all required a 2-meter distance around them, that we would be able to still keep in communication with them and support them on that walk. So we did limit those to 15. I think we are looking at very similar numbers, and we're being very pragmatic about this. 15 for plein air painting. It's actually quite a few for an artist instructor to manage in a situation like that. So I would say for groups like that, 15 is probably at our max side of things. For something like campfire, however, I think this is really site-based, because if we can, and what we have done at the McLaughlin in the past is we have multiple fire rings, and we've been able essentially to set up multiple fire rings. And so kind of like you see outside if you're downtown near City Hall and you see the fires and how different groups can gather around the same fire, we would be looking at that. That's very site-led then. And we would have to follow the outdoor gathering guidelines that would be relevant at that time. But I could see that number being much higher, perhaps as high as 25, and possibly higher than that. I don't want to say that we would want to grow it too much, because you did mention something that I think is really important, which is about the public confidence. And we want these kinds of engagements, these sorts of programs, we offer them in others, at the McLaughlin in particular. Part of their attraction is that they're intimate. And they're community-based. Thank you, Councillor Oosterhoff, because I think that there's something about that community-based feeling in rural Kingston, that we don't want this just to become a group of people who happen to be in the same place and space. So even if they can't interact, we don't want the numbers to grow so big that it becomes something like a festival, because that's not the intent with this programming. Now in future, maybe we will talk festival. But I think right now we're going sort of small and slow in the rollout, community focused, really capitalizing on the nature of the intimate kind of user experience. And for us, the focus right now, these are not meant to be tourist initiatives. These are meant to service and provide experiences to Kingston residents who are craving opportunities to get outside safely and to have these sorts of experiences. So that's where we want to start. And I do think that this committee and our return to it is certain. because over the course of the next several years, our intention is to continue to grow this programming and build all of these intersections. So thank you for that comment. And I went a bit on, but I think all of that is important in kind of contextualizing our approach this year.
Thank you. And are these events, sorry, that's probably my lack of knowledge on this. Are these events, is there a fee, a registration fee that members of the public have to pay? And is that fee changing depending on the number of individuals we can accommodate, right? Because I'm thinking the fixed fee of covering for the salary or the honorarium of the teacher leading the activity won't change, or I don't know how it would vary necessarily. So just curious to know how members of the public that wants to participate, what type of fees they can expect.
So some of the programming will be free. For example, Campfire Songs. Campfire Songs is always a completely open public program. Anyone can attend. Usually the museum is free that night as well, so we extend that offering. That would be our intent with a program like that. We are in discussion right now with Jason Haru and others about associated fees. For the Grand On Stage programming, it may be an extension of a nominal fee that might be associated with accessing the virtual program. So if you've got, essentially, if you have a virtual ticket at a low dollar amount, you would be eligible then to register as part of that ticket for this land-based experience. Some of the other programming, thinking about the plein air painting, we have talked only about material cost recovery. So the department is certainly, we have budget right now for pilot programming like this to help to accommodate and get as many people out and accessible to those programs as possible. So the only fees we are in discussion right now would be around sort of a cost recovery model for, the cost of painting, the canvas, et cetera. So we're probably looking at quite low dollar amounts. And just by way of comparison, it's a similar model to what we use at the McLaughlin. Our programs at the McLaughlin are really not to generate large profit margins. They're really about some very basic cost recovery models. And that's why we can offer things like paddle making workshops at less than $100, where you might see a similar type workshop elsewhere that is well above $100. Because again, our intent is community engagement and education. And so the focus is there more so than on a profit-based model. It's one of the fortunate aspects of the city's programming.
Thank you. I really appreciate the clarifications. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Jennifer. Please stay with us because we will reopen for further discussions from members of the public a little bit later on. So we'll come back. So for now, we get to jump into the business items. Let me just verify with the addendum that I'm not jumping ahead too quickly. No, all is good. Okay, excellent. So business item number 1, which is a Rural Advisory Committee 2021 work plan. And I believe, Janet, is it you or John Balone that's going to speak to it? It's yourself?
Madam Chair, that will be me.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the members of the committee for an opportunity to provide you with an overview of the proposed 2021 work plan. Recognizing that there is a robust agenda before the committee this evening, I will attempt to keep my remarks brief. The 2021 work plan identifies a number of specific items that have been spaced throughout the year and provides a timeline for each report from staff to be provided to the committee. We have also suggested that meetings for the rest of the year be held on May 26th, September 22nd, December 15, recognizing that if other items were to arise, a special meeting could be called by Madam Chair on an ad hoc basis. The work plan that you see tonight reflects items that have been identified by the committee over the past year, as well as some staff identified items. In the past, the work plan really has functioned as the primary source of business items for the Rural Advisory Committee, but due to the increased profile of the committee, important matters are being referred to the committee by staff on an unsolicited fashion, and several of those appear later on in tonight's agenda. So I think that's the end of the remarks that I wanted to make, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the committee has. Thank you so much.
Excellent, thank you. So opening it up to members of the committee, conversation around the work plan. Councillor Usharoff, please lead the way.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't have, this is fine. This is a work plan for this year. And I think I already spoke to Ms. James on that. Just in respect to Mr. Wolf, who has asked a few questions about the boat launch potential and when and where. I just want, it's not on there, but I want to be clear, and Janet, you can just clarify too. It's in the works to have that discussion. It's just that it's not on this year's work plan. We understand what's going on behind the scenes, and there's lots of work and discussion, but it's just that it's not on here, and it's not dead. There's lots of issues that will come up after 2021, but I think it's good to see what we have on the table right now. And again, if there's something that comes up, I'm sure we can. So I wanted to speak to it to make sure we showed respect to Mr. Wolf's concerns, and we will continue that discussion later.
Thank you, Councillor Usharoff. And I think this opens up a conversation also around parks development. A little bit of breadcrumbs from last year's conversation, but quite different from that of the boat launch, I believe. So just curious if that would be possible, feasible and desirable to open up that conversation and continue our discussion on parks development. So Janet, do you think it would be possible to add it as an element of the work plan as a amendment, or if to the opposite, it would be more desirable to keep it in the back of our minds and call special meetings as required as things arise?
I think that really is a decision of the committee. I could advise that if the committee would like to see it added to the work plan, the appropriate place to do that would be, we could amend the item with regards to, I believe it's in December, with the Public Works update. Public Works and Engineering are part of the same city group, and we could have both of those departments within the Public Works over a larger group report back at the same time. And if that's something that the committee is looking to, that would be the ideal way to incorporate that into the work plan, to provide a sort of an overall update with respect to future parks development in the rural area. And just to touch a little bit on Councillor Osterhoff's question or comment, just to sort of summarize briefly for the committee, you'll likely recall that in the spring of 2020, the access to Colonel By Lake was closed. It was access that was through a private property. Staff are aware of the concerns and the idealness of a rural boat launch in countryside, and we are aware of the community's desire for that. You'll also recall that the Community Benefit Program funding, which is an annual amount that is provided to the city because from the Samsung solar project, which is $92,000 per year, that the committee recommended and council subsequently approved that annual contribution be put towards a reserve fund, and that potentially could be used to explore improvements to rural boat launches. And that funding is to be put into a reserve fund until at least 2022. So without additional funding, there's not an opportunity to sort of advance that boat launch work, but it is something that staff are aware of.
That's kind of going in the notes for the work plan of 2022, in which that conversation can be further expanded upon. So I hope Mr. Wolf will hear that. Let me verify if he's part of the attendees. Yes, and I will open the discussion to members of the public as well, but we can definitely take notes for the work plan of 2022 to reopen that. Yes, Janet.
Madam Chair, I don't want to seem contradictory, but it wouldn't be until at least 2023, because the 2022 funding contribution would need to be included, and that contribution isn't made until December of 2022.
That makes sense. I understand. So we need to close that year, that final year of the reserve fund. Yeah.
Yes, and at the time we reported in March of 2020, we indicated that after the 2022 contribution, we would be engaging with the Rural Advisory Committee and with the public community to receive their feedback on how to move forward with that accumulated reserve funding. Thank
Perfect. So a little bit more patience. The time goes by so quick. We'll get there. Excellent. So the only other item that I had personally noted was traditionally we do an annual information session. I know this year is going to be a little bit more special due to the COVID restrictions. So in terms of, inviting members of the public to join us for an information session might be a little bit different. We might need to consider a virtual meeting, but just curious to know if members of the committee are interested in pursuing this annual tradition and if it merits to be added to the work plan of 2021. And if there is staff capacity as well to help us support this event, because traditionally it's been led and delivered mostly by city staff. So fully acknowledging that as well. Yes, Janet, please.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to just sort of reiterate, the City of Kingston is committed to inclusive and accessible public engagement. We actually did not have an item on the Rural Advisory Committee agenda in 2020 for a public information session, which in hindsight, we wouldn't have been able to do anyway, because in March of 2020, not long actually after we approved our work plan, all in-person public engagement was ceased because of the social gathering and restrictions as a result of COVID-19. But Council has approved a virtual public engagement strategy, and that includes real-time engagement using the Zoom platform, surveys that can be done by members of the public via phone with a customer experience representative, or by requesting a survey by mail, where it would actually be mailed out to the resident with a postage paid return envelope, and using the Get Involved Kingston platform, which I think I saw recently at this point now has well over 10,000 participants. And that makes Kingston, based on our population size, a leading municipality in terms of public engagement. And that staff do have a robust engagement platform for all city-led projects. And just wanted to note that the work plan does include an update from the communications and customer experience team, and they are scheduled to be here in May, I believe, with respect to public engagement through a rural lens.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, in regards to that notion that we should have a public information session this year, a strategy, I think we should probably park it for this year, because I think that city staff will need to muster as many resources as they can for whatever is going on with vaccinations. So we should perhaps just step aside and let them focus the resources there.
Thank you. Councillor Usharov?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Will there be a moment to go to the public on this? How does that work? I'm sorry, I'm confused. When will the public be able to speak to this? Mr. Wolf would like to speak.
Yes, so the first round of conversation happens with the members of the committee, which we ask questions. Then we open up to members of the public, and finally we close with final comments or last questions from members of the committee. So until we're final in the conversation that we're having currently, only at that time will it be open to members of the public, but it will happen.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. So definitely keeping it on the radar. I think that the last one that I recall of the annual information session, I thought it was fall 2020 about the floods, but now I realize it could have been fall of 2019, and I just skipped a year entirely. So fully recognizing perhaps a little bit of a blip in memory that we did speak of the floods. We had a fairly good turnout, but a lot of individuals that came were not necessarily from the Kingston area, which was quite interesting in itself. but fully acknowledge, John, as you mentioned, that in terms of capacity time, there's a lot of competing interests, pulling staff in multiple direction, and knowing that the annual information session is typically it takes a lot of staff effort. Perhaps it's something we can park unless we find a subject that is absolutely crucially and fundamentally important to address in the rural area. Janet, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
No, that's perfectly acceptable by me, Madam Chair. And as you say, if there is something of an urgent or specific nature, there is always the ability to have a public meeting of council.
Okay,
committee, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say council.
Excellent. I see Mr. Luke Falwell having a question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a clarification on what Janet had mentioned regarding engineering and parks development coming back in collaboration with Public Works. If we just capture that as engineering, that encompasses parks at this time. So we could also bring engineering updates as well. So it may just allow a slightly broader update to the committee at the same time.
Excellent. That is very appreciated. So the only amendment I can see to the work plan as per our current discussion is Public Works update and Parks Development, lead department being engineering. And that would be December 2021. So kind of adding both together in that one line of the work plan. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it can just be engineering. You don't need to be specific on the parks development side of things.
Okay.
So it can be Public Works and engineering update. That will be
sufficient. Oh, perfect. Got it. Excellent. So seeing no other hands being made, sorry, I muted myself. Seeing no other hands raised by committee members, I will open up to members of the public where we have one hand raised. Mr. Wolf, please.
There we go. Okay.
Excellent. Welcome.
I think it's great that you'll have the parks development issue come up in at the December meeting. It is a long-term issue, but shouldn't be lost sight of because that Graham Park, for example, is just sitting there, and some thought needs to be given to that. On that point, one of the things that could be done with Graham Park is to fix the parking lot when Aragon Road is being resurfaced later this year. That's just a side note. On the question of the boat launch, which kind of gets tied up in the question of Graham Park, it may not be the best place for a boat launch. There are certainly some people on the road who would be quite unhappy to have the boat launch there. But there are lots of people, and not just, mostly not on Aragon Road, but throughout the rural area, and probably a lot of them in the city as well, who were sad to lose the boat launch on Aragon Road. And I think it would be worth seeing what can be done rather more quickly than 2023 to solve the problem that those people face. I have to state quite clearly that I only use a canoe, so the boat launch is not my problem, but it does matter to a lot of people. And there is correspondence, Councillor Oosterhoff has it, from a resident suggesting that there is Parks Canada land on over at Kingston Mills Locks that might be an appropriate location for a boat launch. And so it could be that what's needed is for the city to try to encourage Parks Canada to solve this problem that the city now faces. It may not, Parks Canada might not see it as high a priority as the city might see it. So I think that's really what that correspondence was suggesting. And I think that's would be an entirely appropriate thing for the committee to do. It may not be a work plan issue, or maybe it is. Maybe the city has to think about whether it wants a boat launch on the lake. But it seems to me that that at least is separable from the question of whether or not there is funds available immediately to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. I think it opens up some intriguing thoughts, at least for myself, thinking of, I have no knowledge nor awareness necessarily because I don't have a boat myself. I don't know how many boat launches exist in the Kingston area. their utility rate, how they're operated, if there's fees or no fees on what type of land they're situated, and what type of need there is. Are we in this shortage situation where there is long lineups of people wanting to put their boats in the water, or to the opposite, where there are certain boat launches that are not being used? Like, I think to me, it opens up more questions in terms of my complete lack of knowledge and understanding of the boat launching situation overall of the Kingston area. And so that definitely sparks my curiosity in knowing if this is something of interest to start asking questions, or at least knowing how the rural citizens in the Kingston area are affected by this problem, more generally speaking. Because if there is a lack thereof of boat launches, it's certainly something that merits our attention. Councillor Usharoff, yes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. It is worth talking about. I have a significant, again, it's not probably the right time. I don't know how this fits, because it is a growing pressure that I do face, and I appreciate that there's been dialogue with engineering, with waterfront treatment, waterfront master plan. There's been open-ended conversations here and there. So maybe if we can at least discuss it, and then if I read, I want to make sure I hear Mr. Wolf correctly, because that's not a bad idea. If we as a committee can make a recommendation on how to possibly build more discussion. Parks Canada has not slammed the door in initial discussions, just really preliminary conversations. And so, that's something that we could talk about. I agree. I wince a fair bit when it's December 2022. And that's a long time, so to speak, for the wheels to turn. So is it possible, and Ms. Janes, if you could, can we add it on to for a discussion, a wholesome discussion one more time? Can we do that as a committee? Are we okay to do that? And I'll go through the chair asking that without prejudice.
Yeah, and I think it opens up another conversation, or at least some digging with the city, perhaps not to come to determination necessarily tonight, but how to liaise with the waterfront committee or planning committee, because it sounds like this is something that is broader and bigger, and perhaps is it within the Rural Advisory Committee's mandate, or is this being addressed at the waterfront committee, and that we could better redirect some of those questions there? So Janet, I'm not going to pretend I know. So
yeah, I don't think it's something that needs to be added to the work plan. It is, staff have been here tonight. They are taking notes, and it's obviously something that we can return to the committee with as more information and more answers become available.
And I will continue the journey with it too. Thank you.
Perfect. Excellent. That's very appreciated, and certainly keeping that on our radar. Mr. Wolf, I saw that you had your hands raised and now it's back down. Just wanting to make sure that all is good. So I'll wait a second to see if your hand is raised again.
It's all good. Thank you. And I think the idea of suggesting more information to be gathered would be great. I can tell you that there is only one other place on Colonel By Lake where you can put a boat in, and you have to pay. It's at Rideau Acres. And so for people who were used to fishing on Colonel By Lake, and I can tell you when the bass season opens, that's dozens and dozens of city residents, it's a problem. You actually have to go quite a ways up the Rideau to put a boat in, or you have to put a boat in on Lake Ontario and come up the locks. So for people who'd like to go out and fish for a Saturday afternoon, this is actually, it's quite a problem. And it obviously biggest when bass season opens, but I saw people hauling trailers down the road and finding a place to turn around and go away again all summer because they hadn't heard that you couldn't put in there anywhere. And Councillor Oosterhoff is nodding his head. He probably hears from people all the time. So trying to facilitate a short-term solution for city residents would be a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Really appreciate the insight and some of the extra information for someone like me that is not aware necessarily of the real circumstances that these individuals face mostly during bath season and et cetera. So certainly we'll continue to work with Janet, the city staff, and see what type of liaison can be done with other committees so that we keep this, although not necessarily on our work plan precisely, that we keep this on our radar most certainly and definitely.
Thank you.
Excellent. Coming back to members of the committee, is there any other comments or questions before we close and move to the next business item? Seeing none, let's move on. Let's say,
Madam,
so.
Excuse
Yes,
me,
please.
Madam Chair, sorry, Julia, if I'm stepping on your toes here. You are the clerk, but since my camera is on and I'm unmuted, I just wanted to remind that there is a recommendation with this report. So you will need to put that on the floor and take a vote on it before you move on to the next item.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so let me go back here. The recommendation is that the Rural Advisory Committee recommend to Council that the 2021 Rural Advisory Committee work plan attached as Exhibit A to the report number RAC 21008 be approved. We know that there is one small adjustment to the wording to include Public Works and Engineering on the line for December 2021. So do we have someone that can pass a motion to approve or to put that motion forward, please? Charles Foreman, seconded by Allison Shannon. And then voting, all those in favor, please show your hand. All in favors. Excellent.
Sorry,
Thank
Madam Chair,
I couldn't see John. Yeah. What?
I'm just going to ask one more thing. If members, when they are raising their hands for voting, could please actually raise their hand physically. When you raise your hands virtually, we can see it here in the Zoom meeting, but members of the public cannot. So just to help with the openness and transparency, if you can raise your physical hand, that would be appreciated.
Perfect. And for
Thanks
the
so
voting,
much.
I didn't see John's camera, so I was unable to physically see if his hand was raised or not. So we have a voting that is slightly affected. I'm not sure if he's present at the moment.
Madam Chair, if his camera is turned off, then we are to assume that he's not present. He may have stepped out for just a moment, but we do still have a quorum. So if you'd like to recall the vote, and we can ask that members raise their hand physically, just so any member of the public watching on the Zoom feed can see that as well. Then we have some clarity, and Mr. Warner will just be counted as absent at this time.
Okay, excellent. So let's just do a full revote of the individuals currently present. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, we may now move on to the second business item, which is a Kingston culinary strategy. That is a report to be presented by Lanny Hurdle.
He is not on the call right now. So if any members of the public did have questions about the report at all, they can forward those comments to me via email for redirection. I know Megan's back on the call though, if you wanted to maybe ask her questions, but Lanny's not here right now.
Okay, excellent. And the report that we were expecting from Lanny was different than the briefing, the delegation presentation we received from Megan earlier. Yes, Megan, please.
Hi, thank you. I think this is what we talked about just at the opening of the meeting. So in order for me, as I understand it, to present to this committee, CAO Hurdle had to write sort of a briefing as she did to give some context as to why I was presenting. And so, of course, CAO Hurdle last month presented the marketing bylaw updates. The conversation did touch on the culinary strategy. CAO Hurdle basically, said that I could come back and give sort of a review or update about the culinary strategy. So we did that at the beginning of the meeting. So I do think that report was really just in the context of then allowing or bridging me to present tonight. So if there are specific questions, though, I could potentially, I could for sure answer them.
Thank you for clarifying that. Janet, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, I just wanted to ensure also, as Julia mentioned, there is a staff report that this is the opportunity for members of the public. And although Ms. Knott was here as a briefing, the business item and Ms. Knott was here as a delegation, not as a briefing. Delegations don't actually require a staff report, but since we do have one and Ms. Knott is here, if there are any questions that she's able to answer, then that would be appropriate. Typically, the delegation speaks at the beginning of the meeting, but since there's not a staff person here at the time and at this time, and the report was written to support Ms. Knott's delegation, then it would be appropriate for her to answer those questions. And if members of the public have any additional questions, they can submit those to either Julia or myself through the clerk's department, and we can share those with our colleagues for response.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll monitor the attendees and members of the public if they raise their hands, so we can turn to them. I know Councillor Shroff, yes, please.
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair, thank you. Not a lot to say here, only that I'm hopeful that I know we'll have the minutes of that this is very important, and that we have some short list of goals somewhat. I really wanted to hear Allison very well, and I appreciate that she's going to have dialogue with Megan. Should there be something that we have for parking lot issues, or you call it, that we're going to come back to, so that we as a committee know that there's some successes in moving along here. I just wanted some measuring points for success for us as a committee, because it's so important to see that some things are happening, and I want to encourage that. And but I don't have a whole grasp on it myself, and I want to, but I want this committee to be able to continue the discussion and moving forward. How do we do that?
Excellent, and perhaps this is something that we can work through, with Janet and Julia in terms of determining our own desired outcomes and successful measures and metrics. Essentially, I think some of the expectations, at least that I can speak for myself, of having in terms of the culinary strategy would be, there's a lot of discussion and conversation and in the strategy about a signature. A Kingston specific signature dish, a signature drink, something like that, without necessarily being a festival, because we're still operating in COVID, right? We may not have the luxury of doing a apple picking festival and become the apple picking capital of Ontario necessarily. So I think what I'd be really interested in is in hearing more about that and consultations with farmers, and that what it is that they can deliver on, and what do they think is their niche expertise in production, and what is a common recurring themes that might identify exactly that signature that we're looking for.
Yeah.
So essentially, and I'm just, sorry, I'm trying to answer your question by explaining my own expectations and kind of dreams and hopes, but completely realize that this is my own internal dreams and hopes.
I didn't want to get anything get lost, and I appreciate that we have Megan there. If there was something that we could capture, saying this is what we hope to see. I don't know, but I've said it. So however we can do it, obviously it's through the clerk too, but it's also through this, this topic of culinary strategy. So I just want to see it to be as successful as possible, and that the rural community plays an important role. Thank you.
Yeah. Megan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. So absolutely, I think there's two things at play. One, if you look at sort of the last 3 pages of the culinary strategy, there are, I think, metrics, and it holds us accountable to things that we need to accomplish. But I think that's broader. I think specifically, though, it would be really great to work with yourself, Jose, and Allison, to do some consultation, for us to do some consultation with a recommended list of local producers and farmers, because I think in our culinary strategy, we allowed larger organizations to speak for those groups in feeding in that component about the consultation piece. So I do think I've committed myself to April to come back. So I think, perhaps, we could suggest May, and I could take a month to do consultation with some farmers based on your recommendations of who I should talk to, and then create that storyline with how we will facilitate, sort of breaking out and really highlighting some of the important products and stories. To your point, Charles, not just ones that are produced in local restaurants, but ones that are offered at roadside stands and other particular niche experiences as well. So I could work on some tactics there, Councillor Osterhoff, and present that maybe in May based on the consultation that I have, if
Excellent.
that's fair.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, so our next meeting is going to be May 26th, and it would be exceptionally timely to welcome you again, because we are talking about the Food Venture Program with KEDCO. And there's a few other components. So I think it would be quite a rigorous agenda if we have the grace of welcoming you again.
Happy to.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions or comments by members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Megan, for being with us, and we'll see you in May. Now moving on to the next item, it is the animal bylaw review update. They provided a report, and who is here? Kyle will be presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, we appreciate your time, and we appreciate the committee's time for allowing us to come back to the committee tonight to gain your feedback and comments on this report. We are following up from the report that happened on November 2nd, 2020, where we gave our initial report, and the committee asked for us to come back with details and data after our public engagement survey was completed. We did have actually an exceptional survey result where we had over 1,200 results and individuals that wanted to give our feedback to this report, which was excellent. It was actually one of the biggest results that we've ever had for the Licensing and Enforcement Department. So it really speaks to the gravity of how serious the community takes this report, which is excellent because, of course, as staff, we do as well. So really, this report is providing you that information. We have completed the survey, like I spoke to, and we initially had our report to go to the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee, and that was to be in April. Since further public engagement has been happening, we have decided to defer our report to the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee to June. And for that reason, we want to have more stakeholder engagement, is primarily with multi-residential landlords in regards to the pet limits, because it's a very controversial topic for us right now. And it's something that we don't want to rush through. We want to make sure we do get that proper consultation. So that is something that I do want to update the committee with because it's a decision that we made most recently and it's not reflected in this report. We would like to sort of gather the final feedback of the proposed direction of the bylaw as detailed in front of the committee tonight. And I am here with my colleague, Derek O'Shea, for any comments and feedback that the committee or public has.
Thank you. And thank you for your very rigorous and remarkable efforts. There was significant improvements, at least since we last saw this report back in November, and certainly a lot of data analysis and a lot of good information. I think it was a very interesting report to read, at least speaking for myself. So I'll start by opening up to any questions of members of the committee. And then we can open up to members of the public that are in attendance today. Yes, John, please.
Yes, as someone with a livestock guardian dog, what is the definition being proposed?
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. The definition for a livestock guard means a dog that has been trained and used to work with livestock as part of a farming operation without causing them harm while aggressively repelling predators, and is used excessively exclusively for that purpose.
And another question for me would be the report for the that you're planning to deliver in June, which is being deferred for further consultation. So that report, would it be a report or a bylaw? Would it be that the actual draft of the bylaw? Because I'm really interested in seeing some of the recommendations, because some of the sections were rather inconclusive, and that you've gathered really good information, but not quite knowing where to go from here. And I kind of really want to know where you fall and what kind of conversations happen internally with your team and some further consultations. So I think I'm kind of, the suspense is keeping on.
Yeah, so what the plan of action is that we will be going to the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee with the bylaw as recommended from staff. At that point, the committee will make their decision, and if the decision is final, then we will take it to council for their ultimate decision. Oh, you're on mute, Madam Chair.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think some of my worries as I read this is the very different nature of individuals that live in the rural area, farmers, and also potential breeders, right? We know that there are individuals that will breed cats or dogs, and so a limit of 4 dogs is not a realistic limit. And so how do you still allow this type of activity to occur? Because for some individuals, it is their business. And still respects the inherent nature of the rural areas as well. So I think there's a lot of differences between being a pet owner in an urban setting and being a pet owner in a rural setting. So as long as I kind of want to read and make sure that that inherent nature of the rural area is not respected, but at least portrayed well, so that there's no penalty or for rural citizens necessarily.
Absolutely. Oh, so sorry, through you, Madam Chair. Just really briefly before my colleague jumps in, these regulations would not apply to agricultural zone properties. They would only apply to the rural residential areas. But with that being said, I do understand what you're explaining. Derek, if you have anything to add.
Thank you. Yes.
No, you summed it up very well there, Kyle.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for appeasing my mind. It's always the number one concern when you come to the Rural Advisory Committee is making sure that we got that right. Yes, Councillor Usharov.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. This is great. That's new information, Kyle, for me. Just full disclosure, I'm also on the Kingston Frontenac Housing Board, and I've had fulsome discussions with Kyle and Derek, and appreciate that. And so that means that potentially there's time. I was worried that there were things are moving too fast and we couldn't really engage well. And so I had a heavy heart all day. So I got to scramble here a little bit, but I really appreciate that. That means maybe July or August it'll be presented to council for review or approval. So that's helpful. But Madam Chair, I just want to reiterate what you said there. And so one of the things that really impressed me when we did the fire ban or the fire bylaw with Chief Armstrong was, to me, it was very refreshing that he was able to come up with the recommendation that showed the different zones, north of the rural area and the urban area, and was willing to consider different requirements, recognizing that things are a little bit different north and south, and that's okay. That's the difference is recognized and celebrated. And so, but what I just heard then, Kyle, I understand that agricultural zoning would have different considerations, but then there's kind of like 3 to me, because I think that there might be, and I don't know exactly what they are, but I just want to throw it out there for conversation, because what Jose is talking about is, in some areas the rural might require a different considerations and allowances potentially. And I think that that's worth a look. And are you willing to do that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I agree. I think that there is the opportunity to have further discussions on what that consultation or what that appropriate restriction would be. I think without getting too far into it, there's the situation with the city of Kingston is that we do not have a low-cost spay-neuter facility. And that is a very primary focus because when we base our research on pet restrictions, primarily in an urban area, to other municipalities, they have this type of program in place. So that allows them to put restrictions in urban settings and into rural settings because they don't have the amount of numbers of pets that are either stray or as community cats or dogs that we do, to be blunt about.
Yeah,
so this is something also, Councillor Oosterhoff, that we want to engage not only the Kingston Humane Society, but other nonprofit organizations to how do we get to that level where we can put that kind of program in place. And that will be able to help dictate what the appropriate measure would be to put a pet limit in place, not only for rural, but for urban situations as well.
Yeah, very well said, Kyle, and through the chair, because we had this discussion, I've had 2 days or whatever to think about it. I really want this committee to understand what Kyle just said. Other communities, other municipalities have had it for a decade or more. A well-funded, I don't understand at all, but spay and neutering clinics. This is very important that maybe we need to make a recommendation coming from here even, but this is something that is necessary. And I'm learning this through CARPO, the Kingston Association for Responsible Pet Ownership, and that does great work, but has, and I don't know a lot about them, but I do know they do great work. And we really want to pursue this. And so I don't know if it is something that Rural Advisory can come up with a recommendation in this, but it's something I want to talk about. So having that clinic is absolutely essential to the success, Kyle, you can correct me, of what we want to do in this animal control bylaw. And so we can build on that again later. The other questions I had, and they're all over the map, kind of, Kyle. It's been hard for me to find all the important points here. There's so many. I don't envy you, and there's so many that are very important. But I want to ask about. So I do want to talk about the agricultural, rural, urban concept. I want to ask about AMPs as a tool. AMPs, as we know, are administrative monetary penalties. Are we willing to consider that in the context of being able to be more effective in enforcement in the nuisance dog that won't stop barking? Is there a way to include that kind of in your enforcement? Where do you stand on that?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. It is something that we as a municipality are reflecting on other municipalities, and we're seeing this as a growing trend to keep, I guess, non-criminal aspects and non-criminal fines out of the court systems to relieve that burden from the provincial court system. So you will see those recommendations be put forward towards the animal bylaw that does incorporate a wide variety of the restrictions to incorporate AMPs.
So it might be in there. It might be embedded in there.
Yes.
Yeah. As far as I think we're gonna, because otherwise it's so toothless almost. It's so difficult. It must
Absolutely.
be very frustrating. And so I'm just talking around the table here. Can you tell me and the committee about? Forgive me, I have it written here. My goodness, special permissions. Is that something that you can look at? I mean, maybe special permissions as far as from the commissioner or the director, as far as some homes could be safe homes where they could have a limit beyond a limit number of animals. I don't know if you're going to explore the limits. I would encourage us in this review to consider limits. I think that we discussed that the other communities have had the courage to do that. But when there goes beyond, for those that have special abilities and purposes, and can that be also embedded in a new bylaw?
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, I'm trying to understand what, in terms of, we do have special services where there's like dog daycares, other kind of foster homes. We do have our trap, we have our trap, neuter, vaccinate program that's ran through the city. That's in consultation with our responsible pet ownership group that would exempt certain limits to be able to have these certain facilities and services be able to have more than the set limit. That is some of the restrictions or some of the further consultation that we are looking at and trying to review, and that will be incorporated into the report in June.
Okay, great. And then I don't want to take all the time tonight. I know there's lots going on, but I did want to, so did I hear you right? Are we going to try to come up with limits, or only, see, I want the committee to understand limits can only really be something that can be explored when we as a city commit to spay and neutering. And so clinics, is that correct, Kyle?
That is correct. So currently, as you see in front of you for the report, we do not have limits that are incorporated at this time. But as you know, Councillor Oosterhoff, we are engaging with a magnitude of stakeholders that are for limits. We had a lot of consultation back that was sort of in favor of limits / not limits. So it was almost, it was a lot of feedback, and we're continuing to get that engagement. Again, there's a lot of aspects in regards to putting pet limits in place. Absolutely, we talked about the low-cost spay-neuter program. There is a concern that if we were to put limits, it would be a sort of a hinder for individuals to license their pets, because obviously if individuals have more than what the restriction would be, it would probably deter them to actually license their pets. The other portion of that is the capacity for our nonprofit organizations to take in these pets. If we were to put restrictions on, where would the pets go? So these are all kind of aspects, and not only on top of that, the enforcement. So this all takes an enforcement aspect to be able to regulate this type of restriction. So these are all aspects that staff are currently considering. And it's not necessarily an easy process. So that's why we do want to have a little bit more time to defer this and gain that feedback.
Okay, thank you for that for now. I think there'll be another time yet for me to speak. I should let it go. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent conversation. John, please.
No, my question, thank you, Madam Chair, was actually overcome by the discussion between Councillor Oosterhoff. So thank you.
Thank you. Not that I want to overextend ourselves as a Rural Advisory Committee, but this is a really, really interesting bylaw, at least from my perspective. I know you're planning, you have quite a rigid schedule ahead of you with the presentation to the Arts, Recreation and Policy Committee in June, and then Council July and August. When you have a bylaw draft ready to go, before you present it to the Arts, Recreation Policy Committee in June, would you like us to have a special meeting? If it's not ready for the May 26th meeting of the Rural Advisory Committee, could we look at it just and kind of poke holes before it goes through the correct cycle of approval? I think it's, I'm saying this as a worried person, but just to make sure that really the rural advisory, the rural components are breathed throughout, and that there's no possible enforcing circumstances or consequences that we can anticipate from it. So just wondering if that's an invitation that you'd be willing to take, but also fully recognizing that you have a quite aggressive schedule ahead of you. So take it for what it is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to consider it and take it back with staff to consult with that. We do have a timeline that would be hard to fit into to come back to be able to provide that information. I'm not taking it off the table, but I think I need to have further consultation with my staff to see if that is an appropriate measure, and I can provide that response back to the committee.
Excellent, sounds good. And so you can be in touch with Julia, and if it comes to it, at that time we could call a special meeting just to discuss this precise bylaw, so that way we can provide a little bit more or a little bit less depending on the wording that you fall on for the bylaw, because we know that the wording and the vocabulary is where the magic happens.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now just wanting to turn out to members of the public if there are any questions. So I'll just give a second. Julia, did you have anything to add? Yes.
Just through you, I just want to remind members of the public if they'd like to speak now, just to use the raise hand function, just so we can see it. I'll give them a few seconds.
Okay, so I'll circle back to members of the committee. Is there any last comments before we close this conversation? Councillor Usharov, please.
I had two invited people. Julie, I see Julie here.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Julie. Julie, do you see Mr. Brown there? Is Mr. Brown there?
He is, yes.
I understood that he was just going to address open just conversation about pigeons.
Let me see here. See if he.
Janet, did you want to add anything before?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to remind any of the attendees are here. If you wish to speak to this item, if you could please raise your virtual hand. That is in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom window. If for any reason you're having trouble raising your virtual hand, if you could unmute yourself and identify yourself so that we know who it is that wants to speak. We want to make sure that we do receive the comments from any members of the public who does wish to speak.
Raised hand. I have been muted. Raised hand. Me.
There's Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Am I there? Good.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, I just wanted to, Madam Chair, I had invited Paul to speak. He's somewhat of an expert on pigeons and can put a lot of perspective on sport pigeons is what we're talking about. And it's kind of new to us. And I've really enjoyed speaking to him and learning a lot about it. And he puts a good perspective on things. And Paul, I want to welcome you to say a few things about that.
Thank you, Councillor. To start with, racing pigeons has been around for quite a long time. It mostly came into this country after World War II. A lot of the Europeans that immigrated here for work and so forth brought it over from Belgium and Holland. It's had a heyday in the past, but recently there are fewer and fewer members, at least in this area. We have two seasons which we fly. The old bird season, which are birds that are 1 year of age and older. It starts usually in the beginning of May and ends the first week of July. We race distances up to 800-900 kilometers. Then we have a season which starts in the middle of August to the end of September, which is for this year, the present year birds, which we call young birds, that we race up to about 500 kilometers. We have each of our communities, we basically, the sport is, we register the birds. We're up to date. We have electronics in which allow us to do this, but we register the birds in the race. They have electronic bands. They're put in specially made shipping crates. They're made out of aluminum. They're around 3 feet by 3 feet, and maybe 12 inches high. And the birds are registered into the race. The transport comes, it picks the pigeons up, it takes them away. Usually we ship that evening, and the race will be the following day, and usually Friday night for Saturday per se. And the birds are let go Saturday morning.
Paul, do you mind if I interject for a second, with all due respect? This is a business item. So my understanding of the governance structure of these meetings is that it's only for questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
While your presentation is really interesting, I think it merits and deserves the entire attention that we can give it to. And this is supposed to be a question period. So do you have any question for Kyle that pertains specifically to the animal bylaw? And then perhaps we can connect you with Julia, the clerk, so that we can maybe organize something so that you can come and speak to us precisely about the art and the sport that that you have with the pigeons. So I apologize for interrupting the presentation. It sounds lovely and interesting. Just wanting to make sure that we keep things on track for the meeting.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so any question that Kyle can answer maybe for you for the animal bylaw?
Yeah, a few things. I noticed that the proposed one is between 40 and 60 pigeons. I noticed that Brampton has an allowance up to 80 birds. There are only 3 people in the city of Kingston that fly pigeons. 2 of them have property over a couple of acres. And I realize that you'd have less numbers if you had less property and more neighbors. But in that case, is there any way that that number could be raised?
Sorry, having some mute problems there. Through you, Madam Chair. These restrictions would only apply to residential properties, not agricultural properties. And the considerations are consistent with the regulations that are found in other municipal animal bylaws. So that is presented in Exhibit A tonight. Municipal comparisons for, adding pigeons, regulations in the bylaw and what we've sort of done our research in comparison to, and I can let my colleagues speak a little further to this if you'd like. We're just ensuring that any persons keeping the pigeons will do so in a manner that does not cause a nuisance to the public. And through our public consultation, these are the remarks that we're getting. And we're also taking into consideration that this is a growing sport, and that other municipalities are seeing an uptake on this sport right now currently. So we are trying to do our best for comparison wise, and also taking in feedback from the public to set potential limits for the amount of birds that you would be able to keep. But if there's any further consultation that you would like to have, I do encourage you to reach out to us, and then we can continue to have that consultation.
All right. I find that rather strange. I know that our national organization, the Canadian Racing Pigeon Union, probably 10 years ago had 1,500 members and now is down to 800 members. I know that our combine that we used to have in the mid 80s at one time had 120 flyers from, say, Cobourg, Port Hope area all the way to Ottawa. Now there may be 50. So I don't, and I know in our club we have maybe 4 or 5 guys that fly pigeons, and I know that in the mid 80s we had about 32 people that flew birds in 2 clubs, and in fact we had 10 flyers probably in the from Queen Street to Charles Street area, in which there are none now. So I don't see our sport as growing, as I see it dying. I'm 56 and I'm the second youngest flyer in our club. Most are in their 70s and early 80s now. And I maybe in other areas, but I know in Kingston it's not growing. I wish it were, because I don't see. I mean, I'm early retiring and hope to be able to fly birds, but I don't know in 5 years if there'll be any pigeon racing here.
Maybe it'll be a product of the COVID restrictions and everything that's happening. Thank you, Paul, for being with us and for asking the questions. If there's no other questions, Councillor Ushraf, you have another question?
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe Mr. Ponte might be confused, but he might want to speak there as a public. You see his name there?
Yes. I do not see any hands raised.
He's not sure. He might not know.
Ponte, would you like to speak?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul. You did a great job. And what can I say is it's a nice hobby, and so many people used to fly in the past because there was no law. Everybody was afraid. And now if you have a bylaw, at least you'll feel comfortable of the breed, not being afraid of complaints. And I think Paul, he said everything he had to say. He's a pro.
I have something to say. I wish that they wouldn't specify them as pigeons, because they actually more beautiful breeds than what you see on the streets. And when you present that as a pigeon to the public, they kind of hold back and say, what the hell are they going to do with pigeons, right? These are beautiful breeds. They're nothing like you see on the street. They're not wild.
Thank you. That's very educational, at least for myself, which I've never had the luxury of witnessing flying pigeons, but it does sound like a beautiful thing. Thank you for being with us and for identifying these concerns and these comments to us. I'm sure they are duly noted with Kyle's team and Kyle himself. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or discussions from members of the committee for Kyle?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just before we jump back to the committee, I did notice that there is one other member of the public listed in the attendee list, and it seems that members of public maybe aren't always able to get their digital hand raised tonight. So I just wanted to check for certainty to see if the remaining member in our attendee list wish to speak. If you do, sir, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you, Janet.
Oh, you're very welcome. We just seem to have some the
glitches.
digital hand maybe is not working, but the gentleman has not unmuted themselves. So I assume that means they do not wish to speak. Just better to be safe than sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. No problem. No problem. I am also keeping an eye on the clock because it's a long meeting of 2 hours, 10 minutes, and we still have 2 business items. So if we want to cut it before a 3-hour-long meeting, before 9 o'clock, so I'm trying to keep the meeting a little bit streamlined, fully recognizing everyone's valued time here. Is there, Allison, I think I saw your hand being raised for an additional question, please.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to understand, with respect to the animal control bylaw and the proposals, there's a lot of information specifically related to pigeons, but where does that fit in with other birds? Like there was a time when we talked about backyard chickens and how much is too many. When does, there's different reasons people keep animals, for reasons of husbandry, obviously production, financial gain, breeding, whether it's a horse, a cat, a dog, a pigeon, a chicken, a rabbit. I'm trying to understand where, we've got a lot of explanation about a certain type of animal. How would that compare to backyard chickens? I guess when I'm thinking about people enjoying their own properties, based on what someone is allowed to do on their property, how much is too many? How do you mitigate those things? Yeah. I think it's just due to my lack of understanding about the issue, but I'm just curious how it all fits in. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll leave it between Kyle and Derek to answer.
I'll jump in on this one, and thank you, Madam Chair. So just speaking, the bylaw currently has regulations and has for several years regarding residential backyard hens, and we're actually proposing a cleanup of the definition for eligibility to ensure that any residential property in a rural, residential, or agricultural area will have access to it. But you're right, Allison, most of the regulations are about sort of mitigating any potential neighbor disputes regarding the keeping of the birds. So you'll notice in the residential backyard hens, there's rules regarding setbacks from property lines, the number of birds, when the birds are allowed out of their run, or I should say hens are allowed out of their run and in those areas. And that's what we're proposing with the pigeon keeping regulations. It's in line with what many other municipalities have. We've also spoken with different stakeholders in the pigeon keeping world. So there's the Canadian Racing Pigeon Union. There's also the Kingston District Pet Stock and Poultry Association. We've worked with on this as well. And it's all about, again, just making sure that it's a healthy compromise between people who want to keep these birds and making sure they're kept in a responsible way that ensures the health of the birds, as well as limits potential nuisance situations for neighboring properties. So that's kind of the two distinctions we have in the bylaw. And then there's also obviously poultry, which is viewed from an agricultural perspective, which is not regulated at all in this bylaw.
Thank you. Does this answer your question, Allison? A little bit more? I think you're on mute.
Yes, to a degree. I mean, it brings to mind lots of different questions, but no, for the most part at this point, yes. Thanks.
Thank you. Charles, I saw your hand. It inspired a thought.
It did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm just as confused as Allison. So when they say residential and urban and rural, I get very confused when it comes to the raising of animals. So if I'm going out the Sydenham Road and I see somebody that's a row of houses and say the one guy has pigeons, and yet just down the road is a beef farm and he's allowed to raise his beef cattle, does this mean the guy with the pigeons is not really considered rural or agricultural? That's where I'm totally lost in all this.
Thank you. Derek, please.
Madam Chair, I can try and provide a quick crash course in zoning. So it really is based on the zoning of every individual property. So you can have residential properties in rural zones. So think of a house that might be on a half acre. It would be considered residential, but there may be close or neighboring or adjacent uses that is a 40-acre cattle farm, which would still be considered rural, but is zoned agricultural. So it is difficult. And I mean, the city does have a tool where you can go type in addresses to see the specific zoning for each property. So what we're trying to do is distinguish, particularly with the pigeons, that anybody on a residential property anywhere in the city, urban, rural, would have to abide by these restrictions. And we're also making the distinction that any agricultural property in the city would not be subject to the rules in the bylaw. And that's actually an existing portion in the bylaw. That's not something that we're changing. So hopefully that helps, Charles. I'm not a planner, so that's probably the best I can do for you.
Thank you, Derek. I think it does clarify very well how zoning functions and how, it's complex. It's complex conversation. I remember a presentation on zoning we had a couple years ago, and it was confusing. It was a confusing presentation. Any other thoughts before we close and move on to the next subject tonight? Okay, well, thank you, Kyle and Derek, for being with us and for your rigorous work on this animal bylaw. Definitely a lot of work since we last saw you, so thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing us the time tonight, everyone.
All right, have a good night. Now on to the next item, which is revisiting the conversation with Jennifer Campbell about the cultural programming opportunities. And just wanting to see if there's any other questions by members of the committee and if there's any questions by participants. So if you're a member of the public and you have any question, knowing that the raise hand doesn't work so well, just jump in if you have any question. And as we wait for you to jump in, we can see if members of the committee also has any questions or comments. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for being with us. Seeing no questions, no further questions. I think we had a rigorous conversation earlier. And thanks again for being here. All right, have a good night. Now on to the next item, rural roads projects. Last but not least, keeping a very interesting subject for the last item tonight. Luke, I believe you'll be presenting on behalf of the city. Perfect. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And with me tonight on the call is Anthony Simmons, our Manager of Construction Services as well. Just in front of you tonight is an information report that provides an update on 2021 and 2022 road rehabilitation projects. We've presented a detailed report to council in regards to surveys that we've done on our road network, most recently in 2019. And we have another one planned for 2021, which does an analysis of our roads throughout the city of Kingston. We have close to 900 kilometers of roads within our boundaries, approximately 750 asphalt, 150 surface treated and gravel. So a fairly significant network. And we're working towards improving that network over time. So in 2019, 2020, we've completed close to about 130 lane kilometers of road rehabilitation. We have 70 lane kilometers planned for 2021, including the roads that are on the list in the report tonight. And for that 70 lane kilometers, approximately 35 of them are contained within the list within the rural part of the city of Kingston. So a significant portion of the road rehabilitation work will be taking place in the rural part of our community this year. And we'll continue to report back to council. And as part of our update that we'll now be bringing back to the committee in December, we'll be able to confirm the 2022 list. And if there are other opportunities that are presented through the survey, the road condition survey that's completed this year, then hopefully we'll be able to provide that at that time as well. And certainly answer any questions throughout the process. We most recently, just for information, we've been through Anthony's leadership in partnerships. Last year, we joined up with South Frontenac and entered into a joint procurement opportunity where we pooled our resources and pooled our quantities and worked together and saw a realization of, approximately $300,000 in savings when we grouped together based on previous year unit pricing. So we'll continue to chat with South Frontenac about future opportunities. We've also entered into and will be partnering with Leeds and Thousand Islands. So we're working with some of our partners, and there was further conversation earlier tonight about, how we can support our neighboring municipalities and partners. So we're doing that in engineering services as well in a slightly different way, but we are seeing real savings in that opportunity. So we're putting that back in the pool to do more work. So kudos to Anthony and the team to managing that project with our partners. And we also, for information, we have a tool where we share all of the projects on a map system, which is called the My Neighborhood app on the city's website. And you can zoom into a certain area or your area or any areas of the city and see what's happening. And if it's a planned project in 2021 or possibly 2022 in some cases, and pull up the type of work. So as an example, if we zoomed into the map on Aragon Road, you would see the area that's planned to be rehabilitated in 2021. And that's for not just roads, but parks, Utilities Kingston, and other joint projects as well. So trying to share that information broadly across the community and put some of that information at the fingertips of our residents. I think that gives us a bit of a highlight as to what's going on here in 2021, and happy to answer any questions about the list. And again, Anthony Simmons is here as well if we want to get into some of the technical details. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for the detailed report. Any questions? I know in the past we discussed the Abidon situation. Not sure Councillor Ustroff was going to go there. Councillor Ustroff, I saw your hand, so please be my guest. You're on mute, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. That's silly. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and this is always exciting for us in rural area. We have so many conversations over the time, and so I'm really glad to see this list, Mr. Falwell. And question I have, I do want to say, I think on behalf of Rural Advisory that and the feedback on the Perth Road. With South Frontenac, the grouping together, we celebrate that and we thank you. It's fantastic. It covers a lot of other concerns, the road markings and the safety of biking. And there's so many positives there that, we got a special gift there, and we are grateful for the job. It seems to be very well done. So I wanted to say that out loud. I wanted to ask about a couple of roads. I'm pleased to see Jackson Mills on there. Luke, is that going to cover the big culvert there that we're going down to one lane over the 2 years? Do I see that on there? Or you say, because it says a K&P trail right there, and there is a safety issue there. What can we know a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. And first, just the kudos. Anthony Simmons was certainly the leader of that Perth Road project, and we're very happy with the opportunity to expand the shoulders and do that widening and rehabilitation project. So we do look forward to continuing partnerships with our neighbors, and that's one of the key success stories from last year for sure. In regards to the Jackson Mills project, so yeah, we've got in 2021. We've got a project listed there as the design of the area around the culvert and the K&P trail connection at the northern end. And so we'll design it, and then the construction will happen in 2022 with a full surface rehabilitation of Jackson Mills, not just at that northern section, but the entire length heading south. So it will all be done at one time. So if we can get the design advanced to a point where we could do some of that work with this fall, we certainly like to do that with our culvert replacements in advance of the roadworks. It gives us a winter and some settling that can take place and extends the life of that work. So, but I can't commit to that because we haven't completed the design. But certainly, if we can get in there and do that work ahead of the road resurfacing, we will do that.
Okay, great. And is that a similar kind of approach to Abidon and St. Lawrence, which I know it's a live situation. Looks like we might not have flooding, but who knows? But that's the anticipation and the forecast. But appreciate that those two jobs are on there as well. And wanted to ask you about, forgive me for a minute here, to the east. Because out where Charlie Foreman is out there, those long roads, have we not forgotten them, but have we, are we in a bit of a stalemate there? I mean, those are a lot of roads out there, and I know that you must cringe, Mr. Falwell, a little bit. That those are huge challenges for us, and I wondered what can we say to the residents out there for those roads, and what's the plan for them if I don't see them on this list?
Yeah, so thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So with the survey work that's going to happen this year, we'll have up-to-date overall condition information for our entire network. And we will take that information. It likely happens. We typically start that after, in town or more urban streets have been swept so that we can get a truer reading of the road condition. So that work will start June, July, and be completed as quickly as possible. And we'll work with the data that's provided from the consultant that then will feed into our asset management software and go through the analysis and work on the prioritization of the road improvement plan. We have provided a list to council of 2022 roads at this time. And we've also indicated that there will be other likely opportunities for additional roads to land on that 2022 list.
Yes.
I will say, however, there is a finite budget amount, so we're working within that. But again, if we can find some opportunities to partner with some of our neighbors and see advantageous unit pricing, and we can do a little bit more, then certainly we're going to recommend what we can do within our capital envelopes. And just to the committee and members of the public listening tonight, just to put it into perspective, about 3 years ago we were spending $100,000 to $200,000 across our entire network in terms of road rehabilitation. And in 2020, we spent close to $6 million, and we're going to do the same in 2021. So we have been listening. We are making an effort to improve our overall condition index across the network, but it's going to take us some time to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I totally appreciate that. And we're in a pandemic as well, so it has changed the conversation, but you seem to be doing the impossible. I just need to be remiss if I did not mention this road, the Sunnyside Road east of Sydenham over up to Burr Brook. Is that also, we'll just have to wait for the analysis report and see where we go?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, Councillor. We recognize and we hear you on that project. But again, it would be our recommendation to wait until the 2021 survey results are in and see where their priorities fall as to what we can fit in 2022 and then ultimately prioritizing for 2023 and beyond. And the survey work for and I didn't touch on it in the past. It happened about every 5 years in some cases. We've committed to council that we're going to be doing that survey work every other year now to ensure that we have the most up-to-date information on our road conditions as possible. So we're using the tools and the technology to our advantage and feedback as well in terms of specific things that might come up more localized, but we're trying to use the data to drive the decisions and make the recommendations.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. No, excellent conversation. And thank you, Councillor Oosterhoff, for digging in on these particular situation. We do have a lot of roads in the rural area. I mean, it covers a large surface, like you mentioned, so certainly a lot to keep on the radar. Any other comments or questions? Charles, please.
Oh, I'm unmuted. So what I'm very interested in, yes, our roads are terrible where I live. I mean, they're beyond the beyond. So a lot of heavy truck traffic. So when you're going into the design of the road, how do you decide what surface you're going to put on? Because when I asked the question last year, it went by numbers of vehicles. There's quite a difference between a car going over it and then a truck with, say, 7 or 8 axles carrying 44 ton of grain or gravel or whatever. And what I saw on the 6th concession was just, it's not a real road in my mind, and yet we travel it all the time, and a lot of money was spent on it. It got narrowed up. A lot of people refuse to drive on it now because it is so narrow. If we do all the rest of the roads that way, it makes it quite dangerous to be driving all these big trucks around. And this isn't just me speaking. Every truck driver that comes into our place or Tackaberry Construction was dropping off an excavator in January and couldn't believe how poor our roads were. Right next door to us in Leeds, where we also farm, it's just like driving from night to day. It's an unbelievable difference. You take that kind of stuff into consideration, the size of the loads, the number of sand pits and gravel pits, the edge of the road, I'm not even sure what you call the margin or whatever. It got narrowed in on the 6th concession. We used to be able to pull over on the side of the road and feel quite safe that somebody could get around us. And that's not the case anymore. You know, some of my tractors measure 20-foot width, and there's a narrow spot on the 6th concession when you drive down it. When my tractor's in there, there's hardly room for a bicycle. It's very dangerous to drive down. So we get people who aren't familiar with that road coming at us and expect us to back up, which is totally impossible. And so it creates, you know, it creates a lot of problems. And we don't get up in the morning wanting to have a contest with a small car. And we don't want to destroy our trucks or ask people to come into our neck of the woods with big trucks and just have to, I mean, it just takes springs right out of a truck, hard on the tires, hard on your road too. So I don't know, do you take all that into account as well, or?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, I'll answer some of it, and then I'll ask my colleague Anthony to add as well. So Anthony, you can unmute, turn your camera off if that's possible, just in preparation for that. But yeah, we take into consideration as much information that's available to us. Certainly vehicle volumes, recognition of some of the surrounding industry pits, as you mentioned, quarries, and Anthony and his team do detailed analysis on the substructure as well to ensure that whatever we're doing from a rehabilitation is going to last us as long as possible for the type of work that we're doing. So, but I don't want to take all the credit for that. So I'd like Anthony to add some comments if that's possible, Madam Chair.
Yes, and thank you through you, Madam Chair. Luke is absolutely correct. We take into account the local use, not only just the car volume, but also the local use. But I can say that it oftentimes is a challenge, especially when roadways may have not been maintained and have gone so far that the rehabilitation strategies are very limited. And the more limited those rehabilitation strategies are, the more costly they become. And the more difficult it is to fit within the annual budgets, or even pieces of them within the annual budgets. So when we look at the rehabilitation of any of the roads in our network, we're trying to balance the budgets that we have against the need that is required. And a road may be in poor condition, but however, it may be so poor that it doesn't make economic sense to not suck the last part of the life out of that road before we make the investment that is required at that point of the condition to rehabilitate it, to service those increased loads, those increased traffic volumes. So it's a very fine balance between the management of our assets as a whole for a network, but also the local requirements for usage of those individual roadways. And when we get into the the rural areas, because of the vast nature of some of these sections, it becomes very complicated to strike that right balance. So what we try to do to combat that is stay at the front edge of leading technologies and reaching out to our municipal partners and other municipalities and see how they are both achieving capacity increases while still balancing those budgetary dollars. So we've done quite a bit of work in the last couple of years, and we expect to continue to do more work at staying in front of those, so that way we can find those opportunities for different technologies that aren't as economically detrimental to the annual budget as say just traditional, let's remove everything, rebuild the road right from the base up, and those traditional historical technologies.
And if I could add, Madam Chair, we did provide council a detailed report on the process of the road selection and the analysis, and it may be valuable to share that for information to the committee. But there is a bit of a misconception on fix the worst roads first, and Anthony touched on that a little bit. Is that we try and get as much life once they get to a certain point. There's no value unless we do a full rebuild on it to do it, because we'll just be back there doing it again. So we're trying to maintain and improve the health of our network overall. On a scale of 1 to 100 right now, our overall network is 45, which is fair trending to poor. We want to be in the 60 to 65 range. And, you know, even doing 80 lane kilometers per year, that's increasing our OCI, overall condition index, by a small percentage, depending on the type of work that we're doing. So, and that's with now identifying, you know, $6 to $7 million on an annual basis. So we're trying to do our best effort to identify where we can increase that health of the network overall. And I think with the tools that Anthony and the team are developing and utilizing, we'll get there. And, you know, we're asking, I guess, for a little bit of patience to trust us with some of those recommendations. And we're always open for feedback and suggestions. And Mr. Foreman, we appreciate your comments tonight and understand what that might mean in your neighborhood and in your front yard. And we'll take that back and have further conversations about how we might be able to improve a few of those things. Yeah, there's you know, some stretches of road that are 6 kilometers in length versus you know, what we have to sometimes do in our more urban sections. And so it is trying to use as many tools in the toolbox as we can, and we're improving on an annual basis with the types of things that we can do, what technologies are available, and we plan to continue to improve that network over time. But we're playing, unfortunately, a bit of catch up and trying to do as much as we can. And again, kudos to Anthony and the team for being able to get majority of the 2020 program completed under the pandemic conditions last year, and getting things out on the market early again this year for 2021, so that we can continue to be in front of some of our neighboring municipalities and again benefit on some good pricing. So we're getting there, but it is going to take us some time to move that marker and improve the overall network. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all the details, and certainly for opening our eyes on the complexities behind all of the situation. That everything has to be balanced, and there's no perfect way of doing it. But essentially, the moment that you lag behind a little bit, the catch-up race is a long one to do. We have a lot of infrastructure in the rural area, so certainly recognizing the impact and the dollars that's required to fix that up. Thank you for being here tonight. Is there any other questions before we close that briefing, the business item? Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. And we will see you, you're on our work plan for this year, so we'll see you again.
Great.
All right, thank you. Excellent. Okay, so this closes our section of business items for tonight. And there were no motions. There were one motion for the work plan to be approved. So I believe that there's no additional motion on top of that one that was already passed earlier tonight. There are no notices of motions. There were no other business items. There was a correspondence for your information that you can read. It was added in the addendum package that was sent earlier today. And dates of future meetings were provided. So the next time that we will gather together is going to be May 26th at 6 p.m. And the report on the work plan also provided future dates. So September 22nd and December 15. So you can mark your calendars now as these dates are going to be kind of reserved for the Rural Advisory Committee meeting, unless there's any other additional special meetings that can be called in between those dates, those pre-scheduled dates. So at least we have a little bit of knowledge of when we will see each other again. And so this is the end of the meeting. So calling adjournment. May I have someone to pass a motion to close the meeting? John Wernham, and seconded by Charles Foreman. I saw your hand. All those in favor, please show your hand. Excellent. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone, and thank you for the great call.